Good morning, Trump family. Welcome to Open Source News. Thank you for joining me. God bless each and every one of you. Let's just jump right in, folks. There's plenty of things to talk about. And of course, all of the CNN propagandists out there are absolutely in panic mode after the CPAC straw poll showed that Trump is once again, dominating any competition out there, garnering over 69% of the vote of the people who attended at CPAC. And now has CNN in panic mode, because we saw what just took place in the Republican primaries across the country last Tuesday, where MAGA and America First candidates dominated the victories across the board. And they are absolutely in panic mode, because they know what it's coming here in November, and what possibly is coming in 2024. And they're bracing for impact. They're now making sure they get all of their talking points in line, because everybody that is running as a Republican or as an American force, or a MAGA, is now considered re-election deniers. And that, of course, goes right into the face of how many times the Democrats have denied elections. Anytime they have lost, we know it goes back to at least 2000, where they've denied every election and called it illegitimate. And they've challenged it, and they continue to be not a threat to democracy, I suppose. And every time there has been a Republican inauguration, during the last couple of decades, there's have been riots that followed, where they have set cars on fire, destroyed businesses in DC, because of what's taking place. And one of my favorite Twitter people here, fake news follower of Fake News Critic, aptly points out what's going on. We're going to take a look at a clip from CNN today, where they're saying they're in panic mode. And Adam Schiff keeps doing media tours claiming that Donald Trump is not above the law. No president should ever be above the law, he claims, are simultaneously advocating for Donald Trump to be arrested on criminal charges based on crimes that he didn't commit and that there's no evidence to prove. Of course, an interesting stance to take. But that specific line that Donald Trump shouldn't be above the law is a little bit ironic, because when I think of people who shouldn't be above the law, are these corrupt, elitist Democrats who seem to be constantly just getting away with everything and seem to flaunt their privilege in the face of the law, as these elitist California and New York Democrats seem to really believe that they're just untouchable? We got a new update on the whole Paul Pelosi DUI situation. Nancy Pelosi's husband getting arrested driving late at night in California, completely intoxicated, driving his fancy Porsche. Well, apparently during the incident, Paul Pelosi was flashing his police group membership card in an effort to avoid charges. Folks, this is exactly what we constantly see with the corrupt liberal elite, rules for the but not for me, using their fame, power and influence to subvert the law and protect themselves in their interest. And I frankly am just sick of it. Let's continue to cover this phenomenon known as liberal elitist privilege. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, take a look at this Paul Pelosi in hot water for showing police group membership card during traffic stop. A law enforcement group in California is furious with Paul Pelosi and is considering removing his membership in the group after what he did during his traffic stop, where he was charged with a DUI. During the May traffic stop, it was reported that the husband of the House Speaker and California Representative Nancy Pelosi showed the officers his membership card. Fox News reported the California Highway Patrol 1199 CHP 1199 Foundation confirmed that any member who brings its name or property into law enforcement contact is in violation of the group's terms and conditions agreement. The foundation noted that the part of its policy which states that attempting to use membership in exchange for a quote preferential treatment in any contact with police will result in immediate termination. We will await the outcome of this trial and we'll evaluate Mr. Pelosi his membership status. Once we have all the facts, group spokesperson Laura Reed said to Fox News, if it is proven that he violated our terms and conditions, we will revoke his membership and we would request that all membership items be returned as they are property of the 1199 Foundation. Once we receive those items, we would issue a refund of any contribution he's made to the foundation. These cards are used to identify our members at various public and private events and to show pride in membership and support for the CHP, liberal elitist privilege. Folks, these rich posh private gated latte liberals who want everybody else to be accountable for their actions, of course. This shows you exactly who the Pelosi's are. I mean, we got a good glimpse of it during the early days of lockdowns in the pandemic. Nancy Pelosi, of course, in her district, businesses were shut down, people's jobs were furloughed, people were fired. In many cases, you couldn't even go get a haircut. But of course, Nancy Pelosi and her liberal elitist Democrat privilege was allowed to walk in a private meeting at the salon because, of course, as we all know, rules for the but not for me. It's the same thing with Paul Pelosi. The guy gets arrested after crashing his Porsche. Not just arrested swerving in the road, literally being a danger to society, crashing his vehicle, being completely intoxicated. I could only presume, and what is his first instinct, to flesh his private donor police supporter membership in an effort to get away with it and get preferential treatment. At one point we were even hearing that Paul Pelosi might not even be charged at all. Thank goodness that changed. And also, speaking of privilege, the police involved in the case still refuse to release the body cam and dashcam footage of Paul Pelosi, his arrest. Cops refused to release body cam footage of Paul Pelosi DUI arrest, claiming that it could jeopardize the investigation. Authorities in California have refused to release any footage the DUI arrest of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, his husband, showing the DUI arrest of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, his husband, saying it, quote, jeopardized the investigation. I'm sure that's totally credible. How is releasing what is supposed to be public footage of this arrest in any way going to jeopardize the investigation? I mean, what investigation needs to be done? The guy's alcohol level or alcohol blood level was above the threshold. He crashed his car and then got arrested. It should be case closed. But of course it's Paul Pelosi. So it's definitely not going to be that simple. It's really hard to believe anything coming out of this police department. We also recently had reports that Paul Pelosi was allegedly slurring his speech and had, quote, drug in his system based on reporting from Fox News, and then a couple days later, prosecutors blame auto-generated boilerplate language for allegations of drug use against Paul Pelosi. Prosecutors in Napa County, California are walking back drug allegations in the DUI complaint against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. His husband Paul, following his arraignment Wednesday on a pair of misdemeanor charges in a crash that totaled 2 vehicles and injured the other driver. Wait, am I just learning this right now, that he's only being charged with misdemeanor charges after getting behind the wheel completely intoxicated, totaling 2 vehicles and injuring an innocent driver on the road? And then we're supposed to believe that the allegation that Paul Pelosi had drugs in his system was actually just a typo or a boilerplate association on the charge, and that the dashcam footage has to be withheld in this specific case, because it's just so crucial to the investigation. Something smells incredibly fishy. Of course, nothing new when it comes to the Pelosi's or what it gets. We're going to start having to refer to as the Pelosi crime family. It always smells fishy now, doesn't it? Speaking of fishy in the Pelosi crime family, there's now many questions surrounding Nancy Pelosi. His trip to Taiwan. Nancy Pelosi traveled to Taiwan to increase her family fortune. It appears that her son Paul was with her in Asia. Paul Pelosi Jr. skipped Seoul meetings with his mother during Asia trip, signed a major business deal with Korean hydrogen producer months ago. Seems to be another Joe Biden-Hunter Biden scenario. The same question applies. Why is Paul Pelosi going to Taiwan with his mother and sneaking out of meetings and doing business behind the scenes? At least that's what my assumption in my interpretation of the situation must be. The same kind of thing that we saw with the infamous flight to China with then Vice President of United States, Joe Biden, bringing his son Hunter Biden with him. The Pelosi seem to have written the playbook on this whole thing. And maybe the Bidens just taking notes and replicating the business model. Everything that surrounds the Pelosi family seems utterly corrupt, and it demonstrates elitist Democrat privilege. They can do what they want when they want it, they get away with it, they get inside or trade stocks based on. Nancy Pelosi has very privileged access to information. Nobody bats an eye, the media doesn't seem to care, and nobody's going to investigate it. Of course, the same concept rules for the but not for me rules apply to you, but they definitely don't apply to the Pelosi. Isn't certainly not Nancy Pelosi. And we see the same thing over and over again with all of these left-wing leaders. I mean, look at Kenyatta, for instance. They still have tons of regulations and restrictions when it comes to flying and just basic living on regular Canadian citizens. Their airports are a complete disaster. This is what the Montreal airport looks like. It's an absolute utter mess. But then, of course, none of that mess and none of those restrictions and none of the craziness applies to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau flying on the taxpayer dime to Costa Rica with his family on vacation without any restrictions whatsoever. Once again, folks, it seems like all of these left-wing politicians are just following the Nancy Pelosi crime family rulebook. It comes with instructions and everything. What an absolute joke. Alright, thanks for being here, folks. Please receive a big hug from all of us. Let me know down below